This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Just a few hours ago, we had the new president, Biden, come out and talk about some changes for small businesses. Let me play something for you. Listen to the audio, and we can talk about it right afterwards, okay?
All right.
On Wednesday, the Small Business Administration is going to establish a 14-day exclusive PPP loan application period for businesses and nonprofits with fewer than 20 employees. People can go out and find how to get a hold of these loans. People can find out more at the SBA.gov. Small Business Administration will also remove barriers that have stopped many businesses from being able to apply for these loans. For example, we're making it so that a student loan default or a non-fraud related criminal record does not prohibit someone from applying for the program. We're also making it easier for those one-person businesses like the home repair contractors, beauticians, small independent retailers to secure forgivable PPP loans. At the same time, we're increasing access by increasing oversight. I invite any inspector general in this program with jurisdiction over this program to closely look at these loans and publicly report on any issues they uncover inconsistent with what I'm saying today. We will ensure every dollar is spent well. These changes will bring much needed, long overdue to help to small businesses who really need help staying open, maintaining jobs, and making ends meet. And this is a starting point, not the ending point. We need Congress to pass my American Rescue Plan. It deals with the immediate crisis facing our small businesses. Now, critics say the plan is too big. Let me ask them a rhetorical question. What would you have me cut? What would you leave out? The American Rescue Plan targets $50 billion to support the hardest hit small businesses after this program expires at the end of March.
Well, Lloyd, what is your reaction to that from the American Small Business League? It's only been a couple of hours since the president held that news conference.
Well, my first question is how much money is going to be available? So when they first rolled out the PPP, they allowed companies with up to 500 employees per location to get it, and that was $536 billion. I wonder how much money is going to be in this pool. I would guess very, very small. That would be my guess. I would guess it's very small, right? And this is what they should have done originally. So when they first rolled out the PPP program, this is what they should have done originally. So I like facts. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 89% of all U.S. firms have 20 employees or less. And here's the most shocking statistic. You ready? Those firms with 20 employees or less are responsible for over 97% of all net new jobs that are created in America. Over 97%. So, they should have given, $500 billion to those companies, 6 months ago. But I'll bet you anything you want to bet that pool of money that they're going to talk about is very, very small.
Over the years, you have talked with us on numerous occasions, and it's often been about a lawsuit that you filed against the Small Business Administration or perhaps the Defense Department and how they're treating small business or maybe not treating. Have you any more positive image or hope for the SBA now that it has a former California person, Ms. Guzman, in charge, and the Biden administration? What's your reaction to both of those?
Well, again, I like facts. The Small Business Administration essentially was closed several years ago. So when Ronald Reagan was elected, I believe the SBA budget was somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion. Today, it's $700 million. So with normal inflation, in 2021, the SBA budget would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion. It's $700 million. So there's 30 million small businesses in America. They're responsible for half the gross domestic product. half the private sector workforce, over 90% of U.S. exports, and about 99% of net new jobs. And the only agency to help those small businesses has a budget of $700 million. So think of it this way. 99% of all American companies have 500 employees or less. That means only 1% have over 500, right? Well, the agency to represent that 1% is the Commerce Department, and their budget is over $10 billion. And the agency to represent the 99% of American companies is $700 million.
Well, hang on a second. Don't we have a representative government? What the heck happened? There's an easy question for you. It's a softball right over the plate.
We do not have a representative government, any stretch of the imagination. I think America is the word plutocracy. Is that the right word? Am I right about that? Yeah, Fortune 500 firms control the government. Barack Obama told me one time, years and years ago, that he had to raise $50,000 a day to stay in the Senate. And, that was, in 2007, something like that, right? So, yeah, you can't be in Congress and only taking money from your constituents. You can't do it. You've got to take the money from Fortune 500 firms. Yeah, let's just say this. I'll show you something. So I asked the Pentagon 7 years ago, actually 8 years ago, can I see the names of the companies that you're giving small business contracts to under the Freedom of Information Act? They said no. I sued them. I spent 7 years in court and over $1 million in legal fees, and I won. And here's what I got. This is $1 million I spent.
Wait a minute. Looks like a bad day at the Xerox machine.
Yep, that's what I got. So when you asked the federal government, can I see who gets small business contracts? They go, no, you can't, right? But this is a 26-page document, and all the information of who got small business contracts has been redacted. And I won this. This is a win. So this is what it looks like if you want to spend 7 years in court and $1 million, and you want to see who the Pentagon's giving small business contracts to. This is what you get when you win.
Now, for our listeners, those listening to the podcast as opposed to watching it, would you describe what you just held up for our viewers?
I'm holding up a 26-page document that the entire page has been redacted, blacked out. So it looks like black paper. So what they've done is they've redacted or blacked out the names of all the companies that got small business contracts. And during the course of that trial, now it lasted 7 years, the Judge William Alsop was a wonderful guy, and he made a number of interesting statements. He said this, talking about the American Small Business League. He said, so be more like a David and Goliath. You get to come in there again and be the underdog against the big government, against the big business. And then in that same hearing, he accused the Justice Department of trying to cover up the evidence. Here's an exact quote from the judge. I've said it so many times I could say it in my sleep. He said, the purpose of the Freedom of Information Act is so the public can see how our government works. Congress passed this program so small businesses can have access to these contracts, and here's the United States covering it up. That's what Judge William Alsop said.
So, Lloyd, what is the answer? Surely you can't, there will be a day when you stop suing and there won't be other people in your path that you have trod through the wilderness. So what is the answer that you would like to see?
I don't think there is one. I think that government is so corrupt and that the big businesses are so powerful that there's really nothing that can be done. This lawsuit I won was one of the largest freedom of information cases in history. Over 24 months, the federal government had to reimburse me $1,030,000 in legal fees. Was never mentioned in the mainstream media. So the largest freedom of information case in history was never mentioned in 7 years. You can't find any mention in the mainstream media. One website in DC called GovExec wrote a small story about it. But this should have been on, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox. You should have been everywhere, right? I used to win a very minor lawsuit. In fact, I used to just file a lawsuit, and I would do 15 media appearances talking about it. This one, I won it 7 years. Not one media appearance, not one interview, no newspaper, no nothing. In fact, what's amazing is this lawsuit affects all government contractors, particularly Pentagon contractors, and you can't find any mention of this lawsuit in any publication that covers the Pentagon, defense, or government spending. You can't, it's not there.
And your thoughts as to the reason why are?
Well, the Pentagon, think of the resources of the Pentagon. So I'm the president of the American Small Business League in Petaluma, California. And the Pentagon, you think they want this information out to, national television? What are their resources to stop, people? They're unlimited. They're unlimited, right? People can go to the internet and search on 6.5 trillion missing from the Pentagon. I think that was 2016. So in the summer of 2016, the Pentagon Inspector General released a report. The Pentagon could not account for over $6.5 trillion. I was listening to the Joe Rogan show the other day, and they found an article that's up to 21 trillion now. The day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld gave a speech and was outraged because they couldn't account for 2.3 trillion. And now it's almost 10 times that much. So yeah, the Pentagon can hire it's called reputation management and crisis communication. So there's a number of international companies that do that kind of work. So if you're a Fortune 500 firm and your oil well blew out in the Gulf, or your plant blew up in India and killed hundreds of people, you hire one of these companies to kill the story. But and they're very good at it. To tell you the truth, I haven't been on national television in 7 years. So you can go to LloydChapman.com, LloydChapman.net, ASBL.com, and see me on every news program in the country. I've been on every news program. And my biggest accomplishments have been in the last 7 years, and yet, nothing. So yeah, they've got the power to shut people down. I would advise your listeners to go find a documentary series called Truth and Power. There's 10 20-minute documentaries called Truth and Power. And it basically shows if you're an activist, if you're an animal rights activist or a civil rights activist or a small business activist, the government comes after you with everything they've got, including the FBI. And does that sound kind of outrageous to you?
Well, it does. I mean, we publish our phone number, our email address. We never hear from them at all, period. Yeah. Maybe we're just too tiny.
Well, that could be. But I sponsor the Palm Springs International Documentary Film Festival. I've done that for a number of years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I went, and there's filmmakers from around the world. And I had a dozen people come up to me and say, I've been trying to call you for a year. They say, I call your office and the phone just rings. And I was telling a friend of mine this story. We were driving to LA from Palm Springs.
Well, surely maybe you just need somebody to answer the thing.
Yeah. Well, no, it's if there's not someone there live to answer it, there's voicemail.
Oh.
You can call the American Small Business League at 4 o'clock in the morning, you get voicemail, right? So I told my friend this story. So he takes that.
Give us that number. We'll super it on the screen.
707-789-9575. Y'all call the number and say hi, or leave a voicemail if it's after working hours. But so my friend called the office. It was on Saturday, so he left a voicemail. And on Monday, I called my office, said, did you get any voicemails over the weekend? They said, no. Right? But I can't tell you how many people I've had telling me that they have been trying to call me for, months and months. I've had that happen just, incessantly. But let's just say this. So let's just say some guy sues the Pentagon exposes hundreds of billions in fraud. What do you think they do? What do you think they do? You think they go, oh, that's, well, good for Lloyd. He's, what do you think they do? They'll do anything to silence people. But yeah, if you look at those documentaries.
Well, Lloyd, they have not silenced you. I mean, this must be the 10th conversation you and I have had that we have publicized.
I'll tell you something interesting. If you go and look at whistleblowers and activists like myself, they silenced almost all of them. The number one way that they silence whistleblowers and activists is to file some type of federal charge against you. Well, they couldn't do that with me because, I've won 110 lawsuits in federal court in San Francisco. I'm like a household name there. They couldn't do that, right? But I think it took me a while to figure it out. What they did was they shut down email and phone traffic to my organization. So
give our viewers and listeners your email address.
Well, it's asbl.com, is the website, right? And yeah, it's pretty obvious. Think what it'd be like. The American Small Business League used to get about 50 phone calls a day. We get calls from journalists, from small business owners. I used to get a call a week from somebody in Congress wanting me to sponsor legislation, want me to endorse their legislation, right? In the summer of 2013, that stopped from one day to the next. So we went from getting 50 phone calls a day to 0. I remember people used to write stories about me without even talking to me. It kind of surprised me. Someone would say, "Oh, I saw that story about you in some publication," and that they never even interviewed me. So I would at breakfast, I would search on my name about 3 days a week, and to read news stories, whatever. And let's say on Monday, I Googled my name, and there was 100 pages of articles and stories about me, right?
That's pretty good.
I believe there's 1,300 articles on the internet that mention my name. I had someone do research on Nexus or LexisNexis. Is that it? Is it LexisNexis? Yeah. And the guy said there were 1,300 hits on my name. 2 days later, I Googled my name. I was gone, like I'd never been born. And I talked to a number of consultants who told me the only people that could do that would be Google. So it was during the Obama administration. And I want to say his name was Eric Schultz, who was president of Google's parent company, was a very close friend of Obama's. And I'm going on national television, with documents and proof, showing Obama was cheating small businesses out of, billions of dollars a week. And they didn't like that. And so I got dropped as a blogger from every blog. Business Wire, that was owned by Warren Buffett, sent me an email, said they weren't going to run my press releases anymore. Yeah. So yeah, if you look at my career over 30 years, my biggest lawsuits have been won in the last, I'll say 5 years, and yet I haven't been on national television once.
How does this leave you feeling, Lloyd? Like the guy tilting at a windmill on a donkey, or what?
Well, you know what? I've won 110 Freedom of Information legal battles against the federal government.
Well, where has that left you, for heaven's sakes?
Pardon me?
Where has that left you? It sounds like you're winning these lawsuits, but with too little avail.
Well, yeah. If I win a lawsuit and nobody knows about it, Congress doesn't know that this is going on. Nobody knows. To tell you the truth, what this is a program called the Comprehensive Subcontracting Plan Test Program.
That's what you're holding up now?
Yeah. And the Pentagon adopted that program after I was winning lawsuits, forcing them to release small business subcontract reports to show that they were cheating small businesses out of billions. So they adopted this program. And this is kind of, let me see what you think about this program. They say the purpose of the program is to see if they can't increase opportunities for small businesses. It had 2 elements: the elimination of all transparency and the elimination of many penalties for Pentagon contractors that fail to hit their small business goal.
Well, it would seem to be exactly the opposite of what you would want.
All right, now, it's called people can Google it, the Comprehensive Subcontracting Plan Test Program. So how long would you test if eliminating all transparency on small business subcontracting and eliminating all penalties for noncompliance, how long would you test that, see if that's going to help small businesses? What would you say?
You wouldn't test it for very long, I would think.
2021 is the 32nd year they've been testing that. The 32nd year. So cheating small businesses is a bipartisan issue. Every president and everybody in Congress for 32 years has approved the continuation of the most blatant example of government cheating the middle class in history, the Comprehensive Subcontracting Plan Test Program. It's astounding. It's just absolutely astounding.
Now, I recollect a number of years ago, you had at least one congressman who was on your side. The name escapes me at the moment, but I thought you were making some progress in the halls of Congress.
You know what? Here's what I've discovered. Now, before Barack Obama ran for president, his chief of staff told me to consider their conference room to be my office in Washington. And when I endorsed President Obama, he put my endorsement on the front page of his campaign website. And he appointed me to serve on his Small Business Advisory Committee. And one of our recommendations was to abolish the Comprehensive Subcontracting Plan Test Program. About 10 days before the election, he abolished the Small Business Advisory Council and rejected all of our recommendations. But what I found out is you can't get legislation passed in Washington that Fortune 500 firms don't want. You can't do it. Here's something I've learned. The chair of all congressional committees has a quota that they have to raise, money they have to raise for their party, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And if you're chair of the House Small Business Committee, or the Senate Small Business Committee, you're going to get donations from Fortune 500 firms who don't want federal law to change in such a way that they've got to give small businesses their fair share of federal contracts. So here's some statistics that I've been thinking about lately. So federal law says small business shall get 23% of all federal contracts. So the Census Bureau says 99% of all U.S. firms have less than 500 employees. That means only 1% have over 500 employees, right? All right. So if they complied with the law and gave small business 23%, that means 99% of all U.S. firms would get 23%, and 1% would get 77% of all federal contracts. Now, here's what Professor Charles Tiefer and I agree on. He wrote a legal opinion that says it looks like the government's only giving small businesses 3% and not 23%. They do that by excluding about $1 trillion a year in acquisitions from their calculations. So when the SBA comes out and says, you know, small businesses got 23%, they excluded $1 trillion from acquisitions, and they included billions in contracts to Fortune 500 firms, their subsidiaries, and large businesses around the world. British Aerospace and Engineering, for example, has gotten federal small business contracts. So it looks like only 3%. So what that means is 97% of all federal spending goes to less than 1% of all U.S. firms. And that 1% hasn't created one net new job in over 40 years. And many of them pay zero federal income tax. So Google Fortune 500 firms not paying federal income tax. There's dozens, if not hundreds of stories. So think what it means for our economy when our government is spending 97% of our tax dollars with less than 1% of the companies, and those companies haven't created one job since 1980, and many of them pay no federal income tax. I think it's going to completely destroy the economy.
Lloyd, we started the conversation on a somewhat positive note, at least hopeful perhaps, but we seem to be concluding on a rather dismal outlook. What is your outlook? Do you have any hope, period?
You know what? I don't. I think that I think President Biden will give lip service to small business. I would bet money that the amount of money that they're going to make available to companies less than 20 employees is statistically insignificant in comparison to the, I think it was 40 billion that they allowed, companies up to 5 employees per location, to get, right? So I don't, the Small Business Administration is closed. It's closed, right? The staff of the SBA today is probably maybe a fourth of what it was 30 years ago. So here's some numbers I'll throw at you that I came up with over the weekend. And you check me in my math and see if this makes sense. So half the population of America are women, right? The federal goal for woman-owned small business is 5%. So the half of the population that are women, they get 5%, and the half that are men get 95% of all federal contracts. Does that make sense to you?
Not especially. And if I were a woman, I'd be rather irritated.
Yeah. Well, how about this? So half the population of America are women, and I believe somewhere between 20 to 25% are minorities. Do you know what that number would be? I think it's 25%. So let's just say it's 20 to 25%. So half the population are women, 20 to 25% are minorities. That means between 70 and 75% of the population are either women or minorities. Well, that means that 25 or 30% are white men. All right, the federal goal for women is 5%. The federal goal for minorities is 5%. That means that women minorities that make up about 75% of the population are getting 10% of federal contracts, and men, white men that are 25%, are getting 90% of all federal contracts.
Apparently, members of Congress are not good at math.
No. Well, what President Biden needs to realize, and people in Congress, is we're in very, very serious trouble. We're in very serious trouble. I'm expecting an economic downturn that'll equal the Great Depression of 1929. I literally am, right? We're 27 trillion in debt. Small businesses are responsible for like 99% of all the net new jobs, and the SBA's budget is $700 billion, right? I think they're going to spend something like $28 billion to put a woman on the moon, right? So the only agency in government to help out the 30 million small businesses where most Americans work has a budget of $700 million, and they're going to spend $28 billion to put a woman on the moon. Think about that. That's insane. That's insanity, right? You're out of your mind if you do that, right? Here's something else that gives you an example of how Congress is thinking. I saw on the news this morning, I think they expect 500,000 people to die from the coronavirus.
They've already passed that, as a matter of fact.
So I believe
that's just in the U.S.
Yeah, by the end of 2021, more Americans will have died from the coronavirus than died in World War I, Korea, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Persian Gulf War combined. And the Center for Disease Control budget is $11 billion. The Pentagon spends over $1 trillion a year. So the threat to you and I and your listeners is not terrorist. It's the coronavirus. It's cancer. It's leukemia. It's Parkinson's and heart disease. And the agency that's supposed to protect us from that has a budget that is infinitesimal in compared to what we spend at the Pentagon, right? So yeah, the threat is not terrorism. Let's just look at it this way. I believe since 9/11, including 9/11, maybe 3,000 Americans have died from terrorism around the world, and yet 500,000 have died from the coronavirus. So the threat is disease, not terrorism. To me, if I were President Biden, if he asked me what I thought, I would say the Center for Disease Control budget needs to be $100 billion. It needs to be 10 times larger, because this is going to happen again. It's going to happen again, right? We were not prepared for the coronavirus this time, right? We need to be prepared next time. So the CDC budget needs to be 10 times what it is. The SB budget needs to be probably, I would say, 10 billion. You know, we're looking at a really tough economic time, and they're still, you know, giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. So I'm not sure what needs to happen before people in Washington get their heads screwed on straight, but we're looking at some serious trouble. You know, I would love to see some protest for people protesting about, you know, white male-owned companies getting 90% of all federal spending. I would think, when you think about the government definition of a minority, it includes anybody from China, Japan, India, the Philippines, South America, Mexico, Africa, and Alaska. I believe that's about 75 to 80% of the world's population is included in the federal government's definition of minority, right? I would think that African Americans and Hispanics are getting, tenths of a percent of federal contracts, tenths of a percent, right? But, you know, maybe President Biden, you know, is going to, you know, do something different, but, you know, I don't think so. The lobby in Washington for Fortune 500 firms is just insurmountable.
Well, on that cheery note, Lloyd, until next time, assuming my phones are not cut off, we will we'll probably have to conclude this particular interview, but we'll be back talking with you in the future.
Yeah, go to my website, asbl.com, lloydchapman.com, lloydchapman.net, and look how you used to be on television.
There you go. Right. We won't go down that road. Thank you, Lloyd. We appreciate the time.
You've been watching the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.